As of today, 1,000 American communities have organized themselves into community action groups.
The newly formed groups met in churches and community centers, making plans to improve life in their city neighborhoods and small towns.
The water should be on.
It was the first time poor communities had authority and federal money to tackle problems where they lived.
I think that this is a problem that this group should be actively involved in.
They use the influx of federal money to tackle problems like transportation, like child development, like education, like health care, like slum conditions.
Shriver reasoned that for the poor to have some control over decisions affecting their lives, OEO needed to fund community action groups independent of City Hall, even though he knew that would anger local politicians. And it did.
And they said, what the hell is Shriver doing? Big city mayors were outraged by community action, and they argued, we're the duly elected representatives of the people.
In Newark, Los Angeles, Cleveland, Chicago, action groups carried out rent strikes against slum landlords and protested government policies that maintained segregation. They charged mayors with neglecting their schools and city services and accused them of favoring more affluent communities. Inside the war on poverty, battles erupted in communities across the country in a struggle for power.
From the perspective of the activists themselves, it's a stepping stone for them to get their issues heard and to finally get the city to pay attention and do something about their problems. And sometimes that means they're on a collision course with big city mayors. And so for the mayors, it looks like the federal money is helping these rabble-rousers make trouble.
All they had to do was pick up a telephone, dial a number, and say, we are still working on it.
Shriver met with the nation's mayors to try to ease tensions. We're not trying to exclude mayors, he said, but we want to bring everyone in.
Let's all of us have enough of the spirit of our country and enough compassion to unbar the door to all who are poor.
But few mayors were moved.
And by joining
In his
together,
defense, Shriver told Congress that the war on poverty was not just to help poor people change, but that hostile or uncaring institutions also had to change, especially government. A year into the war on poverty, Shriver found another way to make that happen.
When he found himself politically blocked, what more natural thing would there be but to turn to the law and to see if the law could be made an ally to the poor?
the poor need and deserve the same quality of legal services that the profession owes to all citizens.
He makes an incredible speech, and he pulls the ABA into the Community Action Program through legal services to the poor.
In January of 1966, Shriver opened neighborhood law offices across the country.
We will be representing the poor people. We will continue to accept cases. And
along comes this little pipsqueak lawyer program that says if you keep doing things the way you have been doing, like discriminating against folks who are black or folks who are Hispanic or kids who have arrest records as juveniles, we're just going to have to sue you.
They sued school boards and city governments for discrimination and employers for unfair labor practices.
He had Ronald Reagan, amongst other folks, call him up and say, hey, what are your lawyers out in California doing this? They're suing the Department of Labor. That's me. You're giving them money to sue me. What's going on here?
They were talking about inequality. And all of a sudden, these state commissioners get dragged into a courtroom, the superintendent of schools, the mayor.
Leaders of both parties complained that legal services and community action were a bunch of Boston Tea Parties, and they were dumbfounded. Shriver dared to give federal money to the poor to sue local governments.
He bought into a mess of trouble and stood by it. He was putting his personal capital on the line for this. All the credibility that he had bought with the Peace Corps, all of the credibility of a Kennedy family connection, and his own reputation as somebody from the private sector who'd been successful.
We expect action at the community level. And when you've got action, you've got arguments, you've got dissent, you've got differences of opinion. That's what we're financing. For the first time in the history of this country, poor people actually have a place and a way in which to express themselves. That's community action. Anybody thinks that isn't action misplaces or misinterprets the situation. They think community action must mean community apathy or community torpor or community death. We're creating life at the community level. And when you got life, you got movement, you got dissension, you got action. That's what we want.
Congressman Powell says
Shriver pushed and pleaded with local officials to move over and share power with those who are to be helped. But it can't be token involvement, he said. It must be real.
That question of whether or not the solution to the problems of the country and society involve a partnership of all people or simply involve the workings of those people who are already established leaders, that's the central controversy. And I think that how so many people come on the other side of the issue than Shriver does tells us that for many people the question was not solving poverty, but maintaining power.